Well, tēnā koutou, daji hao. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much, Simon and Fran, for the great invitation to be here with you. Prime Minister Luxon, I know he's just left on his way to Cabinet. Thank you for giving me leave so I don't have to rush off and I can remain here. Your Excellency, a great friend of New Zealand, and my friend Ambassador Wang of China, Mayor of what he tells me is the best city in New Zealand, Wayne Brown. The highly respected, it actually says here fared, but I crossed it, highly respected Fran O'Sullivan, champion of the Auckland Business Committee Simon Bridges, Dame Teresa Welsh, Chair of Air New Zealand, Dame Fran Weil, the Chair of the Asia New Zealand Foundation, my hard-working colleagues, MPs Nancy Liu, Carlos Cheng and any other members of Parliament here, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the business community, distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen, and I repeat again, the most important people in the room, members of the Chinese New Zealand business community, thank you for all that you do and for the opportunity to speak to you here this morning. This summit is an opportunity for us to share perspectives and discuss the importance of the New Zealand-China relationship. This year marks a significant occasion, the 10th anniversary of the signing of our comprehensive strategic economic partnership. It might well have been signed here in this very hotel when President Xi last visited New Zealand. It's certainly an important occasion worth marking. Like China, we attach great significance to the increased trade, enhanced political respect, expanded practical cooperation development, and people-to-people relations. While we often discuss the changes in the Chinese market, it's important to note up front that the foundation supporting our bilateral trade relationship remains steadfast. These, of course, being our robust bilateral trade architecture, including the high-quality bilateral FTA, which we upgraded in 2022, regular high-level political and official engagement, and our, or in this case, your strong business and people-to-people connections. The first time I spoke at this conference was in 2018 when I was on a panel to discuss the 10th anniversary of the signing of the China-New Zealand FTA. 6 years later, it's my privilege to be here as the Minister of Trade. And this morning I'll share with you some reflections on the term so far, as well as insights into my recent visit to China. I'll then conclude with some comments on the government's targets for doubling exports by value and how China fits with that strategy. As you just heard from Prime Minister Luxon, this government is bringing energy and renewed urgency to our international partnerships. We're putting New Zealand back on the world stage, seeking new opportunities for our businesses and making sure that we maximise the benefits to New Zealand in all our international relationships. New Zealand is well and truly open for business, and we're committed to supporting our businesses in this global marketplace. However, even though we are export-oriented and trade-dependent, the contribution of exports to New Zealand's GDP is not particularly high. And in fact, the percentage of our GDP from exports has actually shrunk over the last 10 years. At 24%, we're well down the list behind countries like Singapore, at 187%, Ireland at 137%, and Norway at 56%. And I don't need to point out that it's no coincidence that these countries are all economically advanced and highly successful. We need to change our relative position in these rankings, and to achieve this, we've set an ambitious goal of doubling exports by value within 10 years. As an outward-looking government, we've resolved to renew and sustain New Zealand's international relationships and have undertaken a busy schedule of both inward and outward visits to achieve this. And in this relatively short time, I've travelled to some of New Zealand's key export destinations, including India, Singapore, and of course, most importantly, to China. As a small export-oriented economy, the importance of maintaining and growing these connections cannot be overstated, and it's vital that New Zealand tells its story and maintains its presence internationally. China is one of New Zealand's most significant trade, economic and people-to-people relations, an important destination for both New Zealand products and our people. China accounts for nearly 22% of our goods and services exports in 2023, and with 58 recently resumed direct connections weekly between our two countries, those people-to-people connections continue to grow. This is a significant partnership for both countries, and it's important we continue to support its growth and assist our exporters to grow New Zealand's economy. New Zealand has placed a high value on direct interaction with our Chinese counterparts through successive governments from, as I remember previously, former Prime Minister John Key's visit in 2008, which I was a part of, and then most recently my visit up to China in April. As our largest export market, the Chinese trade relationship remains an incredibly important part of this picture. With a still growing middle class of 500 million people, there are significant opportunities for New Zealand. We continue to be a trusted and reliable supplier of not only high quality and safe dairy, the world's highest quality and safest dairy, meat and wood products to China, but also of innovative goods across health and nutrition, fitness and other sectors. And we're pleased to see a strong recovery in our services trade with China. Prior to the pandemic, China was New Zealand's second largest international visitor market. We're seeing a rebound in Chinese tourism to New Zealand, and as I mentioned, serviced by a return of 58 regular flights a week between New Zealand and China. Education links are also steadily recovering, with more than 21,000 Chinese students enrolled to study in New Zealand in the first 8 months of 2023. And for this reason, as part of the government's increased international engagement, it was important to me that I connect early with my Chinese counterparts. I welcome the opportunity to meet with Commerce Minister Wang Wentao in Abu Dhabi on the margins of the WTO 13th ministerial meeting a few months ago. And then last month I had the opportunity to travel to China to build up my discussions with the Commerce Minister Wang further. On that note, and in keeping with today's theme of navigating today's China, let me offer some reflections of my visit to China last month. This was the first visit to China by the government this term, and an important opportunity to strengthen relationships, support New Zealand exporters, and promote New Zealand businesses on the world stage. I undertook meetings with ministerial counterparts in commerce, agriculture and forestry portfolios, as well as engagements with the governor of the Heilongjiang province and the mayor of Shanghai. In my discussions with Minister Wang, we spoke about our complementary trade relationship, progress achieved so far implementing the 2022 FTA upgrade provisions, and other areas of bilateral cooperation, including in support of the business environment reforms in China and intellectual property rights protection. Likewise, my meetings with agriculture and forestry counterparts provided opportunities to highlight current bilateral cooperation programs and talk much more about areas we can work together. Beyond Beijing, I had the opportunity to visit other provinces. In the Heilongjiang province, I witnessed an agriculture and forestry-based economy deploying its education, industrial and technological assets to create world-leading products and to add value in industries as diverse as meat processing, farm machinery and wooden window frame manufacturing, some of the best in the world. And in Shanghai, I had the chance to hear from New Zealand businesses on the ground to better understand the opportunities on offer and to see how New Zealand businesses are innovating and adapting to meet today's challenges and opportunities in China. I came away from China with a clear view that New Zealand is maintaining its reputation as a world-leading producer of safe, healthy, nutritious, natural and sustainable food products. But beyond that, I also see further opportunity for New Zealand businesses in a range of sectors such as gaming, sustainability and the creative sector. What we also evidence is that the landscape in the Chinese market is changing rapidly. Businesses on the ground are continuing to navigate changes in the regulatory environment, as many parts of the world. Meanwhile, many of our firms have seen rising labour costs. Chinese consumers' confidence has not rebounded as strongly or fully as expected post-COVID. However, China is not a monolith, and this is not the whole story. Across some sectors, companies I've spoken to have seen strong market recovery in China compared to others. And I would note when there are much media a comment of the Chinese economy, I note that they will expect 5% growth in GDP this year and the same next year. Many countries of the world, I'm sure, are envious. But think of that 5% this way. This year's Chinese economy will grow 3 to 4 times the New Zealand economy, and next year it will do the same. There's significant opportunity for us there, particularly with middle income earners as that growth continues. We're also seeing a heightened focus by Chinese consumers on their health and well-being and greater emphasis on their e-commerce platforms. There's therefore also greater competition in the market, including from local Chinese companies. New Zealand firms need to hustle to respond to these consumer trends and remain nimble and agile to stay ahead of competition. And what's more, the global economic landscape continues to evolve, including in ways that are detrimental to New Zealand's interest. The challenge of economic headwinds is not unique to the China and New Zealand trade. As a result of growth, the global economic environment continues to also be challenged. Geopolitical tensions and strategic competition are having ripple effects across trade policy internationally, with countries increasingly turning towards and then looking inwards for greater protection. Unfortunately, as I've seen firsthand at the WTO and more recently the OECD meetings, enthusiasm for trade liberalisation is weakening and countries are turning to greater self-sufficiency and subsidisation and protection. As the world becomes even more complex and contested, so must we become more dynamic and resilient. New Zealand needs to work harder and strengthen our supply chains to maintain our edge offshore and to make sure we're well positioned to navigate economic headwinds moving forward. As I mentioned, my visit to China formed part of our efforts to deliver on this government's commitment to doubling the value of exports over 10 years and to turn the country into an exporting powerhouse. The best way we can ensure long-term advances and living standards is by connecting New Zealand firms with international consumers. We must think and we must act boldly. This is an ambitious target, and business as usual just won't get us there. So how will we achieve this ambitious goal? For a start, we need to take full advantage of the opportunities in our existing free trade agreements, which currently cover about 70% of our goods trade. As I mentioned, exports as a percentage of GDP have shrunk over the last 10 years. So we need more businesses to take up the opportunities for our trade, from our trade agreements, which can drive them to grow, expand and provide well-paying jobs for New Zealanders. For example, there's more we can do to help businesses take full advantage of our long-standing FTA with China. We have to be relentless in tackling non-tariff barriers, which can affect billions of dollars worth of exports and can artificially limit our market opportunities. We also need to build our capacity and the capability here at home to better take advantage of these opportunities. This means ensuring that our policy settings around skills and education, infrastructure and R&D are all aligned in supporting New Zealand companies to move up the value chain, and we have to be open to accept others into our economy. Because that's what Export Double is about, increasing the value of our exports. For far too long, New Zealand gains in trade have come from increasing volume alone, rather than increasing processing and value added, and this has to change. It also means addressing regulatory settings that disproportionately constrain production and discourage investment in our companies. Strengthening our connections with key markets will remain crucial. China is a critical element in our strategy to double our exports by value. With tariff-free access for all New Zealand goods into China and a burgeoning services trade, our economic relationship continues to flourish. We'll continue to harness the opportunities presented in the Chinese market and to do it in cooperation and partnership. While we remain fundamentally committed to developing our trade and economic relationship with China, it's also vital that we work to spread our exposure across many markets, pursuing diversification and working hard to open as many doors as possible around the world. And I'm excited to say that we're on our way towards undertaking more trade as business missions during this term than any other previous New Zealand government, and I hope to lead one to Shanghai, the Shanghai Expo later this year. This is, in essence, our China and approach, that will deliver for New Zealand. Let's take India as an example. Developing a broad-based relationship with India across all spheres as a strategic priority for this government, and as part of this objective, I'm committed to delivering a commercially meaningful FTA that opens the market to Kiwi exporters. We're also pursuing trade agreements with other partners, including the UAE, which I formally announced earlier this month, and of course with the GCC. Doubling exports won't be easy, and this is a journey that will require a collective lift from all of you in the room, and with the government leaning in to help build your international connections and enable growth. We'll support research and development that will help the export economy to grow. This will allow our areas such as world-leading agricultural sector to become more productive, more innovative than it ever has before. And we'll build the infrastructure to support the shift. This government's determined to lay strong foundations for future growth, and infrastructure is a key element of this vision. So in conclusion, this is just the opening part in our increased engagement with the world, of which China remains a significant market and an important opportunity. This government's committed to a dynamic and energetic approach to the world and will lead nimble and resilient in our relationships. And as part of my international engagement, I look forward to visiting China again later this year. The government will continue to look for opportunities for high-level engagement and to drive efforts that support New Zealand exporters and businesses, and we look forward to working with you. Xi, and thank you.
Thanks so much, Todd. I was thinking as you spoke, you mentioned the Shanghai Expo. My first trip to China was, of course, to the Shanghai Expo. Your idea, I think you visited and persuaded the then Prime Minister John Key to let us both go to that. I mean, China, even in that time, what is it, 14 years, has changed hugely in terms of advancement, infrastructure, technology. Give us a sense of your candid impressions. I presume you had time on the ground when you've just been in China, what you saw, what it's like at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. I do remember that visit to Shanghai. It would be 13 or 14 years ago, first when we were new, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed MPs. And Simon, having left, is now even brighter-eyed than he used to be. Shanghai has changed quite significantly. I'll come to that in a moment, because I think actually my reflections on the visit to Beijing tell us a lot about what's happened in China over the last 5 or 6 years since I was there. I remember one of my visits, you arrive, you get there early in the morning, you jump off the plane, you sit in a car for an hour and a half to get to a wonderful hotel, and it felt like you spent much of your time in traffic, although I'm very grateful on many of the occasions when I went with Prime Ministers, the outriders cut through that. This time it was fundamentally different. The city was quiet. The number of electric vehicles was actually obvious, because you wonder why there was not as much noise. The air was clear, such a beautiful blue sky. The traffic wasn't what it used to be because of a significant investment in public transport, and fundamentally that is a change and a shift, and it's a decision that the government has lent into around the environment, and actually realising, as we need to in New Zealand, investment in good, solid, smart infrastructure helps grow economies and helps people do the things we need to, which is do business with each other. Then the visit north to Harbin was also quite fascinating. I'm not sure many people visit there, but to see actually the way they are innovating, particularly around farm machinery, and actually the strength and significance agriculturally of the food produced there to feed people in China. I think there's many things we can learn or do together as we, through cooperation. And then down in Shanghai, which is now a growing, bustling international city that is so much larger, Simon, than when we were there before. And so whilst economies go up and down, I repeat what I said earlier, with a 5% growth rate in China, the envy of many economies and governments around around the world, there remains significant, huge, wonderful opportunity for New Zealanders in that market. And as we move forward, the interest of Chinese businesses will be in the things we're trading with now, but those opportunities around commodity will lessen, and those long-term sustainable relationships, business to business, around growing the value chain and relying upon each other, I think will grow and offer much for the New Zealand economy.
Thanks for that. I mean, look, you know, close to 40 billion in two-way trade. We've heard the Prime Minister talk about China and as the strategy. Some would talk about diversification. You know, I know this isn't your view, but some would also say, well, the relationship in economic terms has possibly peaked. As I say, that's not your view. Give us a sense of your practical agenda. What do we have to do? We've got the gold-plated FTA to wrestle trade up.
Well, no, I don't think the economic relationship has peaked, and I think the only restrictions on it are the ones we impose ourselves. You know, if you talk to New Zealand businesses, as I did when I was in Shanghai, they see nothing but opportunity there. And so, you know, at a given point in time, we should set targets to how much more we want to do, how much more trade we want to grow. I remember John Key's visit, where I think we set a ambitious target of $20 billion worth of two-way trade within a period of time, and it was surpassed very quickly. You know, businesses do what we need them to do well when governments set up a clear framework of rules that they can understand, and then the governments respect them and move out of the way and let the businesses get on. One of the big opportunities for us to grow even further will be around services trade in both directions. I think we sell about $1.2 billion worth of services into the Chinese market, including tourism. You know, of $38 billion, that feels underdone. Big opportunities there. There will be, with Minister Wang, I had conversations about how we fix that, and, you know, we're talking about whether or not we need to upgrade our FTA in the area of services and move to something that is more permissive, that allows trade and services to grow and only focus on the areas there should be restriction, whereas at the moment it says you can only trade liberally in areas that we've already agreed. And so we'll, as a government, will continue to invest, to grow, to look for ways to broaden the trading architecture. But the most important thing that we can do, New Zealand and any trade partner, to support our collective business communities is set those rules up, make sure they work, honour them, and then move out of the way, let businesses do what they do best.
Geopolitics, how do we navigate all of that and trade and what you've just been saying simultaneously? You know, the Prime Minister's, you know, been pretty clear there on AUKUS. We've got a question here about the government's stance on the Belt and Road Initiative and whether we should be making more on that. Your take on these very difficult issues for a small country? Yeah,
well, look, I think that the PM was very clear on this, and ultimately it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, in London or in Washington or in Delhi, Singapore, or in Beijing. We need to be respectful and open with all of our trading partners and talk to them directly. And New Zealand, with an independent foreign policy, has the ability to do that both publicly, but we must do so directly. You know, strong economic relationships always survive the test of time when we invest effort into them. And so ultimately, you know, there are many facets of our trading relationships that remain important to us. The most important thing New Zealand can do is be out on the world stage hustling, meeting directly and talking to our good friends and trading partners about the things that are important to us, the values of New Zealanders, but also making sure that, you know, we are investing in that trade architecture in areas that make the best sense for New Zealand.
A couple of the Slido questions. Do you have any insights or key takeaways into the foreign direct investment landscape from China?
Well, it's very interesting because we do have a lot of foreign direct investment from China. It's important to us. You know, there will be a range of views, I suppose, across the spectrum in New Zealand, but we're not a large country, we're not a rich country. We need foreign direct investment to help grow our economy, but it has to be smart, and it has to work for all New Zealanders, and it has to actually add value to add more. There are very many examples in this room of foreign direct investment from China that's grown the economy and offered great opportunities for New Zealanders and made us more competitive through innovation on the world stage. Our foreign direct investment policies are not country-specific, but through our trade agreement there is great opportunity and advantage with China because of the rules that are set there that give certainty. But we have to be a country that's open for business. We're working through a process at the moment of looking at what the rules are and making sure the system works as quickly as it can so that investors, the business community has certainty. As the PM said, we are well down the list of attracting foreign direct investment, not because there aren't opportunities in New Zealand and not because it's not a good place to invest. Sometimes it just feels a little bit too hard. And so we've just got to make sure investment is in the best interest of New Zealand. It grows the pie, as it were, but that FTA with China gives real opportunity for us to grow that investment from China into New Zealand. And dare I say it, as I've spoken to a few companies here in the room, investment from New Zealand into China.
To keep you on toes, make sure you're earning your cabinet salary today. Stephanie Honey's asked a good one that people like. What are the prospects for China to join CPTPP?
Well,
Can they meet the gold standards of the agreement in areas like digital and SOEs?
Yeah, well, China's expressed a desire formally to join, as a number of other countries have, and New Zealand is supportive of any country that wants to join the CPTPP if they can meet those standards. We've seen the agreement at large with the UK joining, which shows that it's possible, and there's a desire and a will of the original members for the agreement to enlarge. Last year in Auckland, we set out what's called the Auckland principles, the 3 principles to guide the standards that must be set or must be met before an applicant can join. And the current president or chair of the CPTPP is Canada. They're going through a process at the moment of setting up the architecture or mechanism by which the countries can fairly evaluate anybody that has joined, and the New Zealand position is that any country that wants to join the agreement that can meet those standards, of course, we're supportive they should do so.
Let's just change tack a little. You've set a blistering pace as Minister of Trade since you've been in office. You've been, I think, here, there and everywhere. Give us a sense of where you've been and, how you see it, 6 months in?
Well, I can tell you because we put out press releases, so there'll be no surprises of where I'm going.
It may surprise you to know I don't read those anymore.
That's good.
That's why I'm asking.
All right. No, I wouldn't be reading the front page of the paper today either.
Hey. I walked to work today, all right?
There have been a few visits, not a lot, and I take a very different approach this time than being Trade Minister last time. I am focusing on the visits and the relationships that are important for New Zealand that deliver for us, rather than the ones that's nice to do and nice to have, and maybe those ones I can do in my own capacity privately. Been up to India very early on last year. Went up there very, very quickly. It was a commitment we made in this room before the election, and that was worthwhile. I then was up in Geneva as I was given the honour of being one of the vice chairs of WHO ministerial meeting that was held in the UAE. So we got up there to meet a range of other ministers and ambassadors, which was New Zealand's part to contribute to make sure we could have outcomes from the WTO. I've always been really, really clear. It's good if we can do things that help the world, but my job as Trade Minister, and Chris Luxon's been really clear, our job as government on the world stage is to deliver for New Zealanders first, helping others, as a consequence is important. Been up to, where else have I been? I've been up to the Middle East a couple of times, and we've launched that FTA negotiation with the UAE. I've been into Saudi. We have a trade deal that's been sitting there for 17 years and languishing. We're breathing new life into it. There's a little bit of hope and a little bit of optimism, but still a long way to go. A very important visit to China, which I enjoyed very much, and there may well be other places I can't remember. Your top trade official, Vitalis Vangelis, has said, it's the end of the golden weather for trade. If anything, that's a serious understatement. I mean, I think a theme today will be around globalisation and trade, and we're not really that is going. I mean, your sense of that, having been at the WTO, having
been travelling, thematically, I suppose, where's the world at on these things, and what do we have to do to position ourselves?
Well, I certainly think the world is more inward looking at the moment. It's a much harder place for New Zealand than it was 7 or 8 years ago when I was last Trade Minister. Economies have struggled. There is debt as a result of COVID, and inflation, consumer costs are high. And many governments of the world are looking inward for a period of time. The WTO meeting was an expression of that. There wasn't a will to make large decisions that can, put those frameworks in place, those common set of rules businesses can rely upon to grow trade. But, it's as simple as this, and it was actually somebody from Africa that says when people cross a border, to trade, you often don't need weapons at that border to protect it. And so trade is an opportunity to bring down those barriers, to bring countries closer together. But I agree with Vangali in as far as the headwinds and so on. I think it'll be a little while before the WTO is in a place where countries will be willing to make those big, courageous decisions that are good for the world and good for our citizens. In the meantime, New Zealand doesn't get to sit at home. We have to be out of the world stage. There's big opportunity for us there. And of course, if you think about the TPP, which I signed here in Auckland, when the US pulled out and much of the world thought it was over, what would we do? New Zealand was detrimental in getting the CPTPP up and driving it forward, and we launched a number of other arrangements and negotiations, including launching the upgrade to the China FTA at that time, that shows that those who decide to sit at home worrying about the challenge of the world, actually they end up languishing. There will always be opportunities for Kiwis when we're out hustling on the world stage.
Fantastic. Let's finish with a couple of, I think KPIs that we know the Prime Minister likes KPIs he's set, but I know you've been very involved in at a level your ideas. I mean, one of them is to double trade, exports. Is that achievable? And if so, how?
Yeah, it is. Well, it's ambitious and it's certainly aspirational. We've set the target of doubling exports by value over 10 years. And the reason we do that, and I think, Simon, when you and I were in government together last, we set a lot of targets and you work towards them. It is achievable. There is no question in my mind. It takes about a 7% growth compounded per annum to get there, which is significantly more than we've achieved over the last decade. But it's good to be ambitious, because now what's happening is every meeting I have where government officials are coming in, they're saying, Minister, we should do this. This will help achieve the doubling export by value. And many of the companies here, large and small, the sectors are coming to us and saying, we are now working on a strategy to help double exports by value. And so we're going through it systematically at the moment to come up with what will be the start of a strategy, looking at the sectors where we can grow value. Some can go much faster than others. I mentioned services, and in film or maybe in gaming and IT, the growth can be exceptional. In some other areas it will be less so. But the reason, Simon, that we've set that target is to measure ourselves and work towards it, because actually New Zealanders have the quality of living that they have as a result of the exports that we have. And our primary sector has been a very, very important part of that. As Minister of Agriculture, one of the most important parts of it, but we have big opportunities to grow other sectors in the economy. And every time we export more at a greater value, the government gets to do more for New Zealanders, and it costs them less, but actually the quality of life and standard of living of New Zealanders increases. So you are right, it's ambitious, and we're going to drive hard towards it, but actually as we get to the end of the decade, as we've achieved it, it has the opportunity to not only revolutionise but significantly change for the better the New Zealand economy, which will make it much more sustainable and dependable for Kiwis.
Fantastic. The other key KPI you've said, I think I'm right to say, is being pretty ambitious about trade missions and getting out there and taking businesses with you. Give us a sense of why that matters, who should be going, and where? Well,
I met a lady down in Invercargill when I was Trade Minister last time, and she made the most beautiful cushions I've ever seen. And somebody said to her, you should list them on one of the websites in China, you'll sell very many of them. And she didn't know how to do that. And when I saw her a while later, she complained nobody from China had been buying these lovely cushions she made, even though she was told there's big opportunity there. The point of that story is we have to go out and find those markets to sell our products, large or small. We can't sit at home, particularly in Rotorua and Invercargill, waiting for people to come to us. And so ultimately the way we do that as a government is to partner with business to open doors. Free trade agreements are part of that. You know, they bring down the barriers, they give certainty. We then have to go and actually sell something. But I want to change the dynamic or the metric of how we measure the success of a trade or business visit. You know, if you think about your business, if you go to your board and ask for some money to go to anywhere in the world to develop business, if you come back and say, I had a great time, look at the pictures on Facebook and I had a couple of lovely meals, that's not really delivering for your shareholders. You have to do the business and sign the deals. So one of the metrics we also want to judge the success of our trade missions, or business missions, is whether or not deals are being done that increases our exports and our trade. And so we're working through it at the moment. You are right that those two things together, combined with the very ambitious approach to additional free trade agreements, are going to be really, really hard to achieve. It's going to be very, very hard to get to, but we should be ambitious. We should be pushing the boundaries. And if the government's not ambitious, how can we ask New Zealand businesses to be?
Fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. Still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and not a speeding ticket in sight. Minister of Trade, Honourable Todd McClay.
Thank you so much. I've also noticed that being out of politics is great for Simon. When he left the buildings in Wellington, he couldn't do his jacket up. Now he can. A year ago, I could do my jacket up. Now I can't. Thank you very much.
I was just going to... I actually, the thought crossed my mind. See, he stays at the stage because he knows he can get me back while he's still up here. The thought crossed my mind when you entered Parliament, comparison today, you look like you weigh a lot less. And that's a compliment, Todd.
I looked like I weighed less then.
No, you weighed more than
I knew what you said. I just wanted to say it again.